welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something just a little bit different. We're going to strip away the Hollywood glamorization, the Netflix dramas, and all that pop culture mythology surrounding Pablo Escobar. Instead, we are going to look at the Medellín Cartel purely as a staggering, hyper-efficient logistical enterprise. Because, when you actually sit down and look at the math, the operations, and the infrastructure, this wasn't just some street gang. We're talking about a globally scaled supply chain operating with the precision and the financial backing of a massive multinational corporation.
So here's our agenda for today. We'll start with humble criminal startup beginnings, then look at scaling the supply chain, followed by Fortune 500 scale financials, corporate PR and politics, and finally, legacy and the collapse.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Humble Criminal Startup Beginnings, from tombstones to contraband. Let's track exactly how a farmer and school teacher's son scaled his criminal startup. Born in 1949 in Colombia, Escobar actually showed a really early, albeit totally illicit, entrepreneurial drive. And his very first venture? He was literally sandblasting the engravings off stolen tombstones just so he could resell them. From there, he leveled up to stealing and smuggling cars and car parts. But the real game changer, the massive corporate pivot, came in the 1970s. He realized that the exact same contraband routes he'd already built could be used to distribute a product with a vastly higher return on investment: cocaine.
And this quote right here, it brilliantly illustrates his completely delusional corporate-style self-image. He famously said, "I'm a decent man who exports flowers." He fundamentally viewed his illegal operations as nothing more than a perfectly legitimate export business. In his mind, the government had just arbitrarily decided to outlaw it. He literally didn't see himself as a cartel boss, he saw himself as a misunderstood CEO.
Moving on to Section 2, Scaling the Supply Chain, Fleet Management and Logistics.
Okay, so at its peak, this organization completely cornered the market. They controlled a mind-boggling 80% of the entire worldwide cocaine supply. And if we look just at the United States, their market share hovered somewhere between 84 to 90%. I mean, in the legitimate corporate world, a monopoly of that magnitude is almost unheard of.
So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a logistics coordinator managing this fleet for a second. You are overseeing the movement of 15 tons of product every single day. The precision required is insane. Large cargo planes depart Colombia heading for a private cartel-owned island in the Bahamas. They land on a custom-built 1-kilometer airstrip to refuel, rapidly transfer their massive cargo onto a fleet of smaller, less conspicuous planes, and then those smaller planes fly under the radar to land on remote dirt roads in South Florida. Your team has to perfectly coordinate 5 to 7 of these highly illegal flights every single day, without fail.
And to maintain that kind of daily volume, the cartel needed extensive fleet management. In the late 1980s, when authorities finally managed to seize a chunk of this corporate fleet, the inventory was just staggering. We are talking 142 planes, 20 helicopters, 32 yachts, and over 140 different homes and offices used as safe houses and logistical hubs. But get this, perhaps most incredibly, this 1980 smuggling operation actually utilized 2 actual submarines. They literally had their own Black Ops naval division to move product completely undetected. Absolutely wild.
Of course, operating all that heavy machinery required immense manpower, and compensating their specialized contractors extremely well was exactly how they ensured the supply chain kept moving, despite the intense legal risks. Pilots smuggling the product, often cleverly hiding it right inside the actual plane tires, could earn up to $500,000 for a single successful flight into the U.S. That is $500,000 for a day's work. Talk about unparalleled employee retention in a dangerous field, right?
Let's dive into Section 3, Fortune 500 Scale Financials, Overhead versus Profit.
Okay, this is where the business model becomes truly terrifying. On the overhead side, it costs the cartel roughly $1,000 to refine a single kilo and another $4,000 to smuggle it into the U.S. So a total production and freight cost of $5,000. But on the revenue side, the U.S. street value for that exact same kilo was between $50,000 and $70,000. This incredible contrast created profit margins of up to 1,300%. Legitimate corporations could only dream of margins like that.
And that 1,300% profit margin translated directly into an astonishing daily revenue. $60 million. Not a year, not a month, every single day.
To really put that astronomical daily revenue into perspective, an average U.S. household earning around $51,939 today would have to work and save absolutely every single penny for over a millennium. 1,155 years to be exact. And that's just to match what Escobar's enterprise pulled in during one single 24-hour period.
So, what happens when you multiply that daily revenue across an entire year? You get a $22 billion yearly operating income. If we treated the cartel as an American Fortune 500 company, at its peak, they'd rank as the 129th largest company by yearly revenue. That means Escobar was generating more yearly revenue than corporate giants like Starbucks, Southwest Airlines, Union Pacific, and even Facebook.
But as you can probably guess, managing physical cash of that magnitude creates some highly bizarre operational costs. Think about this from our logistics coordinator's perspective again. Because it was an entirely cash-based enterprise, their overhead included $2,500 every single month just on rubber bands to hold the stacks of bills together. They had to stash money in warehouse floors and bury it in remote fields, which meant they simply had to accept massive inventory shrinkage, a 10% loss of revenue, which is about $2.2 billion a year just due to natural spoilage from water damage, and rats literally eating the money. And when cash becomes that meaningless, you get crazy anecdotes like Escobar burning $2 million in cold, hard cash like firewood, literally just to keep his daughter warm while they were on the run.
All right, Section 4, Corporate PR and Politics, the Robin Hood Strategy. Escobar recognized early on that a multi-billion-dollar illicit business absolutely needs loyalty from the local population to survive. So he used his vast wealth to aggressively fund community programs. We're talking building churches, hospitals, food programs, parks, football stadiums, and even constructing an entire barrio to house Colombia's poorest residents. By directly funding the infrastructure that the state failed to provide, he generated this intense, unshakable local loyalty, massively influencing his status within Colombian society. This deliberate cultivation of a Robin Hood persona was an incredibly effective corporate shield. The public saw a benefactor, not a cartel boss. This localized public relations strategy basically protected his operations from local informants, making it nearly impossible for authorities to catch him in his own territory. I mean, this loyalty ran so deep that when he eventually died, 25,000 working-class citizens actually showed up to mourn at his funeral. But he didn't just want street loyalty, he wanted state power. He actually used his immense popularity to get elected to Colombia's Congress, aiming for political influence and legal protection. And later, when he was facing the very real threat of being sent to an American prison, he made an unprecedented offer. He volunteered to pay off Colombia's entire national debt, an estimated $10 billion, straight out of his own pocket, in exchange for a truce and preventing his extradition. The state declined, but the sheer audacity of that offer is just unmatched.
And that brings us to Section 5, Legacy and the Collapse.
Now we have to look at the dark reality here. Maintaining a market monopoly of this size required the systematic, terrifying elimination of state authority. Behind all that staggering wealth was a horrific human cost. The cartel was responsible for an estimated 3,500 murders. And these weren't just rival gang members. To protect his supply chain, Escobar targeted the very pillars of the state, murdering a presidential candidate, a justice minister, an attorney general, 200 judges, and over 1,000 police officers. This sheer level of violence is ultimately what sealed the cartel's fate, forcing the world's governments to finally unite against him.
The enterprise violently collapsed when the CEO, Pablo Escobar, was finally gunned down on a rooftop on December 2, 1993. It was the culmination of what the United States described as the largest manhunt in history. When Escobar fell, that massive $30 billion logistics machine largely died right there with him, instantly fracturing the global cocaine supply chain.
But before the collapse, those insane profits funded some absolutely absurd real estate ventures that left a permanent scar on the landscape. He purchased a 20-square-kilometer recreation property. To put that in perspective, it featured 800 homes and villas. He literally spent $1 million just training exotic Himalayan egrets to sit perfectly still in a single tree. And of course, most infamously, he built a massive private zoo, importing giraffes, elephants, and hippopotamuses from all around the world.
Which leaves us with this final, truly bizarre reality to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. How does a criminal enterprise, with the operational logistics of a Fortune 500 company, leave behind an environmental footprint of roaming hippos in Colombia?
Because today, decades after the empire fell and all that money was seized or eaten by rats, those imported hippos actually escaped his private zoo. They've multiplied, and they are now an invasive species thriving in the Colombian wilderness. It's this surreal, living monument to a logistics empire that possessed so much power and so much money that it literally altered the ecosystem of an entire continent. So, what do you think is the ultimate lesson of a business this terrifyingly efficient? Let that sink in, and thank you so much for joining me for this explanation.